Hey everybody, welcome back to Football Talk with Vinny. In today's video, we're going to go over the power rankings for Week 7. So with the Monday night game just wrapping up, I feel like that's the best time to really go over my power rankings, seeing as all the games are now officially over. So let's get right into it. I'm going to have the Houston Texans as a 32nd team. They did drop one spot from last week. Just an interesting note, they are on a pace to be outscored by 257 points for the season, which would be the 6th worst all time. So they are on a historic pace at this point of being outscored. Again, even though they're not winless like Detroit, they are actually getting blown out of almost every game they play, whereas Detroit is making it close in most games. So the 31st team I'm going to have is the New York Jets. Again, obviously with the Zach Wilson injury, is going to miss a couple weeks, or at least projected to miss a couple weeks. Their team was already bad to begin with. When now it looks like they're just trading for Joe Flacco earlier this morning. He actually might be the starter come this week. Obviously a long season now for the Jets. Next, I will put the Lions here at 30, so I'm actually going to raise them 2 spots. Again, the reason behind it is they're always playing close games against teams you don't necessarily think they would have played a close game against. And this week's no difference with the Rams. You would have thought that Matthew Stafford was going to just light them up, which again he did, but the game was much closer than I think most people thought it was going to be. Next, I'm going to have the Dolphins at 29. Not too much here. Just dropped them 1 spot. Had a very close game with the Atlanta Falcons. Not a very good team, but a decent team, and obviously was not able to come away with a win. Did overcome a 10-point-ish deficit as well, though. Next team I'm going to have is the Jags. I have them dropping 1 spot. They didn't play, but it's just I have a team that rose up the power rankings, so I had to drop teams as well. Another team that dropped 2 more spots in the power rankings is the Washington football team. Again, looked lackluster again in a loss to Green Bay in a 24-10 game. Offensively, kind of moved the ball a little bit, had some unfortunate turnovers in the red zone that could have given them a chance to win. But again, against a good Green Bay team, to lose by 14 and just drop them down. Next team, which is very close, I wasn't sure if I wanted to put them below Washington based on the game they had, but it's the Philadelphia Eagles. They dropped 2 spots as well. Looked very bad against the Las Vegas Raiders. Really not much to say there. Oakland did whatever they wanted offensively. I think Derek Carr was like 33 of 36, so ridiculous numbers for him. Next, I'm actually having Seattle Seahawks. They just played. They're going to move up just 1 spot. Although they did lose, defensively they played a good game. They gave themselves a chance. Again, you're going up against New Orleans, which at this point, now that they've played the same amount of games as the Buffalo Bills, they are now the 2nd ranked defense in terms of points allowed. So again, their defense is elite, so it's going to give them chances to win. But if you're Seattle, again, the reason why I rose them up the power rankings is just because you gave yourself a chance to win in a game where I think most people would have thought New Orleans could have handled business. And again, this is now 2 straight weeks. Last week was against Pittsburgh, where without your starting quarterback, you were in the ball game and had a chance to win down the stretch. Next, I have a team that dropped the most of any team in my power rankings, which is the Denver Broncos at 24. The reason for dropping them is pretty simple. You had a golden opportunity to get a win on a short week where you're playing a team without their starting quarterback, both their starting running backs, and both of their starting receivers did play, but they were both banged up and questionable. So you pretty much were playing a backup offense and on a short week as well, especially since it's the backup quarterback that had to play. So again, he didn't have many days to learn the playbook and understand and get familiar with the game plan for the week, and you were still not able to win that football game. I think it's obviously clear now after that 3-0 start, it was really just because you played some really terrible teams, so you were able to get some victories early against some bad football teams. But the way Denver is playing now, it seems like this team is going to be a 5-6 win team, but definitely does not look like a team that even could compete for a playoff spot. Going from a team that's dropped the worst in my power rankings to a team that actually rose the highest in my power rankings, I'm going to have the Giants ranked here at 23. Reason is simple, they looked very good against the Carolina Panthers team. They had a couple key pieces still missing on the offense. Obviously Saquon being the biggest. So again, in order to go there and thoroughly dominate and outplay a Carolina Panthers team that, yes, they're without Christian McCaffrey, but they're still a 500 team. So I think that's a very impressive victory for a Giants team that needed a victory in the worst way. Number 22, surprisingly, I'm not really going to drop them in the power rankings. They're going to stay where they're at. It was the San Francisco 49ers who played Sunday night. Although they did lose, and in my opinion, they got thoroughly outplayed by a Indianapolis Colts team. But the reason behind not dropping the Niners was I just felt like all the teams that were below San Francisco were not better football teams than the Niners. But if you're San Francisco at this point, you again won your first 2 ball games against not good teams, and you've now lost 4 straight games. So I think if you're the Niners fan, you're pretty much in panic mode at this point. You need a victory this upcoming Sunday. You cannot fall to 2-5 and make the playoffs. It's just not possible. If you can get a win this week and get to 3-4, you're still giving yourself a chance. Number 21, obviously another disappointing team, is going to be the Carolina Panthers. Again, I have to drop them. You looked absolutely terrible against a Giants team that was without a couple of key players on their offense, and you looked terrible as well on your offensive end. Again, I know the Giants defense sometimes has good games, sometimes they don't show up, and they showed up this week. But if you're Carolina, obviously you can't play this way. And this is now essentially, after the 3-0 start, it's 4 bad games in a row. You've lost all 4. A couple of these games were absolutely winnable games. And what you've done is you've essentially just erased the great 3-0 start that you had. And now you're, 1 game under 500. So now you're now battling for a playoff spot, where had you had beaten a team like Philly and maybe won this week to an injured, battered Giants team, you would have set yourself up. Very good for the second half of the season. Now, all of a sudden, during the second half of the season, you're going to have to win more ball games than you lose in order to just try to sneak into the playoffs. Next, I'm going to have the Chicago Bears at 20. Only have them drop in 1 spot, even though they got blown out. But again, it was to a very good football team in the Tampa Bay Bucks. I've been saying this for weeks. I just didn't think that Justin Fields looks ready to play. Sure, he'll give you some splashy plays here and there, but overall, he definitely doesn't look like he's ready to play. He has a lot of bad plays, a lot of missed throws, a lot of overthrows, a lot of interceptions. And for a team like Chicago, who had hopes for making the playoffs, I thought it would have been a better idea to stick with Andy Dalton when he was healthy and ready to play. But that obviously looks like that is not going to happen, and you're going to now have to stick with Justin Fields, because it's pretty hard to tell everyone the rookie quarterback is your starter, he plays a couple bad games, and then bench him for Andy Dalton, because then it's tough to go back to him. So once you made the move, you're unfortunately stuck, and now you're just going to have to ride him out for the rest of the season. And again, if you're Matt Nagy, that's not a good idea, because you're probably going to get fired. But for Justin Fields, it's good, though. He's going to get some reps this season, and maybe next year with the draft and free agency, if they can improve the team some, he can have a better chance next year for success. Number 19, I'm going to have the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously got a much-needed win against a Miami Dolphins team that looks like they're very bad. And if you're Atlanta, this now puts you at 3-3, gives you a chance at least to get back into the playoffs. Not an impressive victory. Again, Miami is now 1-6, so they're not very good. So to have a narrow victory like that and need a game-winning field goal doesn't say a lot about Atlanta, but I guess a win is a win, right? 18, I'm going to have the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had a bye week, so they didn't play. I did have them dropping 1, but again, that's more so to do with the teams that were below them last week. They got some victories, so I moved them up. And one of those teams is the next team on the list. 17 is Indianapolis Colts. Again, you got a huge win at San Francisco. Much needed victory. Puts you back in the discussion for not only the division, but also probably more realistically the wild card. And if you're Indy, you had a couple of tough losses to start the year. I think they started 0-3, but now they've bounced back. They're now 3-4, so they won 3 of their last 4 games. And it's really given them a chance after that terrible start to put themselves in a position to make a run at a wild card spot during this second half of the season. Another team that moved up drastically, another 4 spots, is going to be the New England Patriots. Again, you got a very impressive win against the Jets. Again, the Jets are no team to write home about, but again, any victory you can get if you're New England after starting off the season with a couple of losses to some good football teams, and you had a couple of bad losses, just kind of like the Colts in the sense of now you're at 3-4, you give yourself a chance in the second half to make a run at the postseason. Number 15, the Vikings, didn't really have them moving. They had a bye week, so nothing really to talk about there. Number 14, gonna drop the Kansas City Chiefs down 4, no longer in the top 10. They're at 14, although I don't think I'm down or as worried about them as a lot of other people are. Mainly because if you look at their 4 losses are to the Chargers, the Bills, the Titans, and the Ravens. If I were to ask you who are the top 4 to 5 teams in the AFC, those would likely be your 4 to 5 teams, right? I think everyone would have Buffalo, Tennessee, and Baltimore definitely in their top 5. And I think the Chargers would make the top 5 or 6 teams in the AFC. So you're really saying that their 4 losses are to arguably the best 4 teams in the AFC. Maybe Cincinnati you would rank ahead of one of those 4. So again, I'm not too down on them because again, you're not going to have to play all those teams all again. You only really play the Chargers one more time. So as they start to play some other teams on their schedule, if they can stack wins against them, I think everyone will kind of be like, okay, well, they're definitely not the favorites anymore, but they're a dangerous team come postseason time. Now, again, kind of like the teams that are 3 and 4 at this point, you've given yourself very little room for error because now, if you were to, let's just say, go 3 and 4 over your next 7 games, you're looking at 6 and 8 and you're almost out of the playoffs at that point. So you kind of have to start getting some more victories. And number 13, moving up 1 spot, got the New Orleans Saints, who just had a win tonight. Again, defensively now that they've played the same amount of games as Buffalo, they are the number 2 ranked defense in the NFL in terms of points allowed. So again, with the defense that's as dominant as they are, your offense always has a chance because you're always going to be in ball games. So you're able to just kind of run your offense through Alvin Kamara. And even though Michael Thomas is projected to come back a little later than expected, eventually, hopefully, I think at this point, maybe he will be back. And when he comes back, it should open some stuff up for the offense. But again, if they can just kind of stay around this, just slightly above 500 mark, until Michael Thomas gets back, get themselves to get into the postseason. Come postseason time, you got an elite defense with an offense with some couple weapons like Kamara and Michael Thomas, anything could happen. Number 12, I was Cleveland. Even though they got a big victory against Denver, didn't really have them moving up just because I think the teams ahead of them are either A, better than them or obviously healthier than them, which is a big factor. But again, when you have so many injuries that they have, to get a big win against Denver, to keep yourself alive and just not fall too far back by the time your guys do come back from injury. Number 11 I'm going to have is the Los Angeles Chargers. Even though they did not play, I have them dropping 2 spots. Really, it's just because some of the teams that were ranked right below them last week got huge victories, so I decided to move them ahead of the Chargers. So with that, let's get into the top 10 very quickly. With the number 10 team, the newest team to the edition is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously getting a huge win against Philly. Not particularly a great team, but you handled business. You played very well offensively, and you did not make it close, which is what you're supposed to do when you play bad teams. I think between them and the Chargers, you could have, maybe flipped a coin as to who you wanted to rank as 10 and who you wanted to rank as 11. I just went with the Raiders because, again, they had a big victory, and in terms of record-wise, they are now just slightly above the Chargers. Number 9, one of the biggest drops from the top 10, I'm going to have is the Baltimore Ravens at 9, and kind of like I said last week, when I ranked them at 5, the reason why I didn't have them higher is because they asked Lamar Jackson to do literally everything. So if you look at the game for this week, the running backs did pretty much absolutely nothing. The defense kind of was non-existent. Like we had said, we need to see more consistency from that Baltimore Ravens defense. I gave them credit against the Chargers. They played a very good defensive game, but obviously they followed that up with a very bad defensive game plan against the Cincinnati Bengals. And to me, until we see some consistency, it's going to be hard to rank the Baltimore Ravens too high on the list. Again, they're still a good team, mainly because Lamar Jackson is still playing at such a ridiculously high level, considering he doesn't have much talent around him. I think it speaks to how great he is as a player, and also just how his MVP season was not as much of a fluke as everyone thinks it was, or at least some of the Lamar haters thinks it was. The number 8 team I actually have dropping down 1 week, even though they did not play as well. It's going to be my Dallas Cowboys. Again, the only reason really for it is because I think a team, or 2 teams specifically, we played well enough this week to move ahead of the Dallas Cowboys. And one of those teams is going to be at number 7 with the Cincinnati Bengals. Anytime you get a huge win against a previously top 5 ranked team in the Baltimore Ravens, definitely have to move you up the list. If you're Cincinnati, if you look at the actual standings, they are the number 1 ranked team. So if the season were to end today, again, long way away, but they actually have the number 1 seed. But again, getting a huge win on the road at Baltimore, definitely have to move you up a bunch of spots. They are clear contenders to make the playoffs. I think before, when they had started 3-1, everyone was like, well, we'll see over the next 3-4 weeks if that winning streak continues, and obviously it has. So at this point, you have to look at Cincinnati as a real threat to make the playoffs. Number 6, I'm going to go with the Tennessee Titans, moving up 2 spots from 8. Now, the reason why I don't have them moving up any higher is because a couple factors. A, I have the Kansas City Chiefs ranked as my 14th best team. So again, This is not like beating the Chiefs of old, this is beating the new Chiefs. So if they're the 14th ranked team, how many spots can you really move up if you beat that team? That being said, it was a very good win. Again, defensively, I just don't even understand how that happened. To hold them to just 3 points is pretty crazy. I think if you would have went into the game, you would have said, yeah, absolutely, Tennessee can get 27. You just would have thought that 27 might not have been enough to win. So again, we'll give the Tennessee Titans some credit on the defensive side. They played a very good game. Kind of like we said with Baltimore last week, though. We need to see some consistency from the defensive end, especially for the Tennessee Titans is concerned, because we know their offense has weapons everywhere, right? So you know they're going to be able to put up points against almost any team. So their defense just needs to be able to make some stops, not shut people out like they did against Kansas City, but if they can just play a little better and get some stops and hold teams to 20 plus points-ish, right? 20 to 21, around there, they should be able to win a lot of football games this season. I think all the teams ranked ahead of Tennessee at this point are all just playing better than the Titans. Although the Titans' last 2 wins are arguably against 2 of the top teams in the AFC, it was really hard for me to put them in the top 5. So with that, we'll get right into it. At number 5, we're going to have the Green Bay Packers, obviously just taking care of business against Washington with a 24-10 victory. Obviously, the news came out today that Davante Adams has COVID, so his status for playing the Thursday night short week game is highly questionable. Unless he gets 2 negative tests on Tuesday and Wednesday, he's almost guaranteed to miss. Number 4, I'm actually going to have this team drop down 1 spot. I'm going to have the Los Angeles Rams here. And again, like I said, I'm going to try to do the power rankings, obviously based on the totality of the season, but more specifically the last 3 to 4 weeks. And over the last 3 to 4 weeks, I just think the 3 teams ahead of them are just playing better. If you look at the Rams this week, yes, you got a victory against the Detroit Lions, but the game was much closer than I think people would have thought it was going to be. I think most people thought that the Rams were going to absolutely blow out the Lions. This was Stafford's game to show him that, he's still an elite quarterback, and you would think the Rams as a team were going to want to go in there and just absolutely crush the Lions, but that didn't happen. You did get a victory, but it was much closer than we thought it was going to be. Which leads me to the number 3 team I have is the Tampa Bay Bucks. They've been blowing teams out now for it seems about a month. It seems like every week it's a 30-point victory since the New England game, which was super close. They've just been absolutely crushing teams, which is what you want great teams to do, is to just take care of business when you play the bad teams and just make sure you win by double digits. Obviously, the reason for them being ranked 3rd is the top 2 teams I think are also taking care of business against their opponents. And again, once you get to this top 3, top 5, it's tough to rank any team. You can kind of flip a coin as to put which team where. Number 2, I'm going to go with the Arizona Cardinals, so no change from them. Obviously, you took care of business against a bad Houston Texans team. Like everyone expected, they were down 5-0 at one point in the first quarter, but then they scored, I think, 31 in a row to win it 31-5 or something like that. Again, if you're Arizona, another big game this week against the Green Bay Packers on Thursday night. If Davante Adams doesn't play, if you're Arizona, you got to try to get a victory there. At this point in the season, if you're Arizona, anytime you can play a team like Green Bay and get a victory on them, it'll be huge because you put yourself even further away from having and locking down that number 1 seed, and you're winning the tiebreakers if you beat Green Bay. So there's a lot of positives that they can gain from getting a victory. Whether Davante Adams plays or not, if you're Arizona, this is a huge opportunity for you. But for me, my number 1 team still, even though they're off the bye week, did not play. It's still the Buffalo Bills. At this point, if you look at point differential, Arizona just narrowly went ahead of Buffalo by 3 points. But again, when I look at it as Buffalo is 4-2, and their point differential is better than a team, or at least 3 points lower than a team who's 7-0. That just means when Buffalo wins, they absolutely crush their opponents. But when they lose, they've lost a couple of very close ball games. To me, between Arizona and Buffalo, they're both very close. If you look at the top 2 teams in scoring differential, again, it is those 2 teams. Buffalo is in the top 5 in both scoring offense and scoring defense, as Arizona is in the top 5 in scoring offense and scoring defense. So again, both teams are playing very well on both sides of the ball. For me, it's just very difficult to knock Buffalo off the top seed after a week in which they did not play. And Arizona, while they got a blowout victory, it was against a Houston Texans team who I have ranked as the 32nd team ranked in all of football. So how impressive of a victory can you really have when you're playing the worst team in the league? With that being said, if Arizona is able to beat Green Bay and Buffalo, again, they have an easy week this week against Miami, but if they were to beat them, pretty bad, but Arizona beats a good Green Bay team, maybe that might be cause to swap them. But that's going to be it for the power rankings for week 7. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did like the video, make sure to hit a like and also subscribe, as both of those do help the channel out a lot. And I look forward to watching the games and updating you guys next week on the power rankings. Thank you guys so much. Bye.